7:36 right now, and a suspect wanted in connection with a double homicide has been found dead. This case all started last Wednesday when two victims were found shot to death outside of their townhome along the 7900 block of Tam O'Shanter Boulevard in North Lauderdale. Those victims seen here identified as Jennifer Belloni and her daughter, nicknamed Nana. Police say the daughter's father, Andre Anglin, was the only suspect in the shooting. BSO now saying Anglin shot himself inside of a bathroom at a Circle K along Sunrise Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale.
On the morning of April 13th, 2022, Jennifer Belloni, 32, stepped outside her home at the Willow Woods Townhomes on Tam O'Shanter Boulevard in North Lauderdale, Florida, with her children ready for a regular school run. Within minutes, at least 8 gunshots shattered the quiet morning air. A nearby daycare went into lockdown. A 911 caller a block away described screams that abruptly went silent. When deputies arrived, they found 2 bodies lying roughly 15 yards apart in a parking lot. A mother and her 15-year-old daughter, Anastasia, still in her school uniform. 2 young boys, ages 2 and 6, were found alone near the scene. The Broward Sheriff's Office immediately named a suspect, Andre O'Dane Anglin, 34, a man with a documented history, a court record, and a direct connection to the victims. A 5-day manhunt was about to begin. Every case starts with evidence and works toward the truth. We rely on verified facts, documented timelines, and official records, not speculation or sensationalism. Subscribe to stay updated as we examine each case clearly, carefully, and professionally. Jennifer Belloni was 32 years old at the time of her death. She was raised in Margate, Florida, and was described by everyone who knew her as a woman of deep warmth, resilience, and humor. She was the kind of person you could call at 4 in the morning, and she would show up, not out of obligation, but because that was simply who she was. Friends said that even in her hardest seasons, Jennifer found a reason to laugh. She carried her pain quietly and her joy loudly, which made her the kind of person her room gravitated toward. By 2022, Jennifer had done something remarkable. She had rebuilt her life after years of an abusive marriage. She had purchased her own home, a townhouse in the Willow Woods development, and was raising all 4 of her children as the sole provider. She was back on her feet, as her Aunt Balanda Belloni described it. She had separated herself financially and emotionally from a man who had taken so much from her, and she had created a stable home for her children. She was not a woman waiting to be rescued. She had rescued herself. That effort, the deliberate, difficult work of escaping abuse and building something new, is the most important context for everything that followed. Jennifer Belloni did everything right, and she was still killed. Anastasia Belloni was 15 years old. Her family called her Nana. She was Jennifer's oldest child, the daughter who arrived first, and, in Jennifer's own words, made her a mother. Their relationship was a kind that runs deeper than the everyday. Jennifer did not merely love Anastasia. Anastasia was the reason Jennifer changed, grew, and kept going. Just 9 days before the shooting, Jennifer posted on Facebook, "Today I want to show appreciation to my daughter, who is my angel. This little girl is a reason of change in me, my motivation, access of unconditional love, and who made me a mother. Anastasia, I love you with everything in me. I know the world isn't prepared for what you're going to bring to it." Those words, written less than 2 weeks before Anastasia was killed, now read as something both beautiful and unbearable. A mother who saw her daughter's future as a promise the world had not yet cashed. Anastasia's Aunt Balanda, the same age as her niece, raised more like a sister than an aunt, described losing her as losing a best friend. On the morning of a shooting, Anastasia was wearing her school uniform. That detail stayed with everyone who covered this case. A child dressed for school, for a future, for a day that was supposed to be ordinary. Jennifer lived at the Willow Woods Townhomes with all 4 of her children. Anastasia, 15, a 6-year-old son, and a 2-year-old son. All 4 children shared the same father, Andre O'Dane Anglin. Jennifer was the only parent functioning in their daily lives. She was the one who took them to school, made the meals, paid the mortgage, and kept the lights on. The weight of that household rested entirely on her shoulders, and by every account she carried it without complaint and without asking for a round of applause. Andre O'Dane Anglin, 34, was not a stranger who entered Jennifer Belloni's life from the shadows. He was her high school sweetheart. They grew up together in Margate, Florida, fell in love young, and eventually married. They had children together. On the surface, it looked like a love story. Beneath it, a pattern of control and violence was quietly taking root. According to family members, Anglin struggled to maintain steady employment throughout the marriage. Jennifer, by contrast, worked and provided. She was not only raising her children, she was in many ways raising him too. Balanda Baloney described Anglin as someone who smoked heavily, contributed little, and grew increasingly controlling over time. He became, in her words, oppressive and abusive. What began as teenage love had curdled, slowly and then all at once, into something dangerous. Andre Anglin's history of domestic violence did not begin in 2022. It began at least 13 years earlier. Court records document a domestic violence incident in Margate in 2009, for which he received probation. There was a second documented incident in Tamarack in 2011. By the time Jennifer filed for her first restraining order in February 2018, Anglin had already accumulated a paper trail that stretched back nearly a decade. In her petition, Jennifer wrote that he had threatened to kill her multiple times. That restraining order remained in effect only until April 4th, 2018, when Jennifer did not appear for a scheduled hearing. She returned the following day and had it reinstated, but only until April 17th, 2018. The order lapsed. Jennifer did not follow through to make it permanent. This is a pattern seen in domestic violence cases across the country with a grim regularity. A victim who attempts to use the legal system runs into barriers, emotional, logistical, financial, psychological, and does not complete the process. The system rarely reaches back out to ask why. Anglin also weaponized his own fragility. According to Balanda, he threatened suicide multiple times over the course of his relationship with Jennifer, a recognized manipulation tactic used by abusers to maintain emotional leverage over their partners. We would pray with him on the phone, Balanda recalled. Jennifer's family tried to help him. Jennifer herself tried to help him. That generosity was not reciprocated. Jennifer and Anglin separated twice before their divorce was finalized in 2020. Even after the divorce, Jennifer did not cut ties cleanly. She attempted to help him land on his feet. She connected him with a pastor who sent him money for an apartment. She gave him financial assistance herself. She co-parented as best she could with a man who had threatened her life. But Anglin did not want practical help. He wanted his wife back. He sent her messages. He made demands. He could not accept that the marriage was over. He wanted his wife back, but it was too much abuse. She didn't want him like that, Balanda said. I believe this was a motive. In the months before the shooting, Anglin had no confirmed address. Detectives later noted that when traffic tickets were issued in 2021, his listed address was on Sierra Club Drive in Lauderhill. But by April 2022, he was a man with no fixed place. He had been unmoored from everything except his obsession with a woman who had finally said no and meant it. On the morning of April 13th, 2022, Jennifer Baloney was preparing to take her children to school. The two young boys were already in the car. Anastasia was ready, wearing her school uniform, book bag in hand. It was a morning like any other. Jennifer was on the phone with her mother, an ordinary call, the kind that happens between a mother and daughter when someone is getting ready to start the day. Then Jennifer said she thought she saw Anglin outside. She told her mother she would call back. She said, "I'll talk to you later," and hung up. She never called back. Balanda texted Jennifer around 9:30 that morning. She never got a response. Shortly after, Balanda's older sister called her about a shooting in Jennifer's neighborhood. That is how a family finds out. Not from a detective at the door, not from an official notification. From a sibling calling in a panic about something on the news. The shooting happened just after 9 a.m. in the parking lot of the Willow Woods Townhomes complex on Tam O'Shannon Boulevard. According to a nearby witness who called 911, there were screams, then a burst of gunfire, then more screams, and then silence. At least 8 shots were fired. Deputies in North Lauderdale Fire Rescue responded within minutes to the area of Tam O'Shannon Boulevard and 80th Avenue. When they arrived, they found Jennifer and Anastasia lying roughly 15 yards apart, one body on the grass between 2-story buildings, one body next to a blue 4-door car, with its doors still open. A nearby daycare immediately went into lockdown. Yellow tarps were placed over both bodies as investigators began their work. Witnesses reported that Anglin shot Jennifer first. When Anastasia screamed, he turned the gun on her. She had dropped both her book bag and her younger brother's book bag, trying to run. She ran for her life, and he still found a way. Those words, spoken later by Balanda through tears, contain the full horror of what happened in that parking lot on an ordinary school morning. A 15-year-old girl running, book bags on the ground, and still not fast enough to outrun a man who had decided she would not survive the day. The two youngest children, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, were inside the car when the shooting happened. They are believed to have been sitting in that vehicle as their mother and sister were killed just feet away. One of the final 911 calls came from a woman who arrived at the scene and found the boys alone outside near their mother's body. 2 children, the youngest of them barely old enough to form words, suddenly without a mother and without a sister in the span of less than a minute. That image, 2 small boys standing near the body of their mother in a parking lot, is one that no one who responded to the scene that morning is likely to forget. The Broward Sheriff's Office moved quickly. Andre Anglin was named a suspect by the afternoon of April 13th. An arrest warrant was issued, and a reward of up to $5,000 was offered through Broward Crime Stoppers for any information leading to his whereabouts. His physical description was released. 34 years old, 5'10", black male. He had no confirmed address. Detectives knew he frequented the Margate area, but could not pinpoint where he might be hiding. The shooting had taken place in a residential complex, in the middle of the morning, in front of children. The community reacted with fear and grief in equal measure. Strangers left flowers at the site. Online memorials accumulated thousands of messages from people who had never met Jennifer or Anastasia, but who recognized in their stories something deeply familiar and deeply frightening. The knowledge that this kind of violence is not rare, that it lives in neighborhoods just like theirs, that it ends lives just like the ones they love. Despite their devastation, members of Jennifer's family stepped in front of cameras and made a direct public appeal. "Turn yourself in. Bring us peace, Andre. We did nothing but good to you," Balanda said. That appeal, from a grieving family asking their loved one's killer to surrender, speaks to the complicated, suffocating grief of familicide. When the person who destroyed your family is also someone you once shared a table with, someone whose children you helped raise, someone you prayed over on the phone at midnight when he claimed he wanted to die. "You are a coward and God will deal with you," Balanda told reporters. "He took my baby's life away. He took my best friend, my niece." The raw fury and sorrow in those words capture something that a court record never could. For 5 days, Andre Anglin evaded capture. Where he went, who, if anyone, helped him, and how he sustained himself during that period remain questions without full public answers. BSO's Viper Unit, a specialized team trained to track violent and dangerous criminals, worked continuously throughout that week alongside homicide detectives. They followed his known patterns, his known associations, the areas he had frequented. They were patient and methodical, and on April 18th, 2022, 5 days after the murders, they found him. Just before 6 p.m. on April 18th, 2022, BSO detectives and the Viper Unit converged on a Circle K gas station at 901 West Sunrise Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, approximately 8 miles from the Willow Woods townhomes where Jennifer and Anastasia had been killed 5 days earlier. Anglin was inside the restroom. Deputies moved in and attempted to make contact. They heard a single gunshot. They forced their way inside. Andre O'Dane Anglin was dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney issued a statement in the aftermath. "I'm very proud of the excellent work conducted by our investigators and Viper Unit. They located and tracked down a menace to society. Unfortunately, this coward decided to take his own life rather than face justice for the heinous murders he committed." The word coward appeared in the official statement from the sheriff of Broward County. It also appeared on the lips of family members, neighbors, and strangers who had followed the case for 5 days. A man who spent years threatening a woman who loved him, who waited until she was heading to school with her children to kill her, and who then, when finally cornered, turned the gun on himself rather than face a courtroom. The cowardice was consistent from beginning to end. Jennifer Bologna did use the legal system available to her. In February 2018, she filed for a domestic violence restraining order against Anglin and documented his explicit threats to kill her. That order was not made permanent. She missed one hearing, returned the next day, and had it reinstated, but only for a matter of weeks. Then it lapsed entirely. This is a failure point that recurs in domestic violence cases with a grim regularity. Victims who attempt to obtain permanent restraining orders frequently fail to complete the process, not because they're not serious about their safety, but because the process itself is difficult to navigate, emotionally taxing, and often takes place in a courtroom setting that is intimidating and under-resourced. Advocates have long argued that the burden of maintaining protective orders should not fall entirely on the victim. When a woman in danger misses a court date, the system should follow up. It rarely does. There is also another layer to why victims often do not complete restraining order proceedings: fear. Pursuing a permanent order means escalating the legal confrontation with a man who has already threatened to kill you. For many women, the calculus is not apathy. It is a terrified assessment which action is more likely to keep them alive in the short term. The 2009 domestic violence conviction, the earliest record associated with Anglin, came 13 years before he killed Jennifer and Anastasia. 13 years. He received probation. There is no public record of any meaningful intervention into the underlying patterns of the behavior during that time. He was not monitored indefinitely. He was not required to complete long-term behavioral rehabilitation. He was given probation, and then the legal system largely moved on. By the time Jennifer was trying to leave him for good in 2020, Anglin had a documented history spanning more than a decade. The danger he posed was not speculative. It was written in court files. And still, there was no mechanism that caught him. No red flag system, no automatic welfare check on Jennifer, no outreach from a domestic violence advocate following up on the lapsed restraining order. The paper trail existed, but no one was reading it as a coherent, escalating story. Domestic violence researchers have long identified the period immediately following a separation as the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship. When a victim leaves, especially after finally acquiring independence, a home, and financial stability, some abusers experience the loss as something existential. The control is gone. The access is severed. And for a man like Anglin, whose entire relationship with Jennifer had been built on possession, her refusal to return represented an unbearable loss of power. Jennifer was not killed because she stayed. She was killed because she left, and she succeeded at leaving. That is not a detail that softens a horror. It sharpens it into something that demands a response from every person who designs and administers systems meant to protect women. The very act of building a better life, of proving that she could do it alone, was, in Anglin's mind, the unforgivable act. He came back not to reconcile, not to beg, but to take from her the future she had built without him. When a perpetrator dies before trial, the legal process that would have publicly examined every piece of evidence, every threat, every court filing, every testimony from neighbors and family, never happens. There is no sentencing, no verdict read aloud in a courtroom while a family watches, no official record of guilt established before a judge and jury. For the family of Jennifer and Anastasia Bologna, justice arrived as a confirmation of death in a gas station restroom, not as accountability in a court of law. That absence is its own kind of wound. Balanda Bologna and the rest of the family were left to grieve without the structure of a trial to give the loss any formal shape. They knew what happened. The police knew what happened, but the law never got to say it out loud, and the full story of what Anglin did and what warning signs were missed was never examined by a judge. The most devastating unresolved thread in this entire case is the two small boys who were in that car on the morning of April 13th, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, both the biological children of the man who murdered their mother and their sister. They lost everything that morning: their mother, their oldest sibling, their home as they had known it, and the father they never truly had. The psychological weight of what they experienced is difficult to fully measure. Research on children who survive familicide consistently documents long-term trauma, disrupted attachment, grief complicated by confusion and shame, the near impossible task of processing violence committed by a parent. These boys will grow up carrying the memory of a morning they cannot fully understand, knowing what happened on some level before they have the words or the emotional framework to hold it. Who is raising them, how they are being supported, and how the community around them is responding to their needs. These are questions a public record does not answer, but they are the living legacy of this case, and their well-being deserves as much attention as any other part of the story. 9 days before she was killed, Jennifer Belloni sat down and wrote something. She wrote about her daughter. She wrote that Anastasia was her angel, the reason she had changed and grown, the source of unconditional love in her life, the person who made her a mother. She wrote that she loved her daughter with everything in her. She wrote that the world was not prepared for what Anastasia was going to bring to it. Those words are not a footnote to this story. They are the center of it. Jennifer Belloni was not primarily a victim. She was a mother, a woman, a daughter, a friend, a person who looked at her 15-year-old child and saw someone the world was going to have to reckon with. Andre Anglin took that future. Anastasia's her own. In a parking lot on a school morning, in a neighborhood where children were dropping off book bags and parents were making ordinary calls, and the day had not yet decided what was going to be. The story of Jennifer and Anastasia Belloni is not, ultimately, a story about the man who killed them. It is about what they were before he arrived with a gun, and what was lost when he did. It is about a 15-year-old in a school uniform whose mother thought the world wasn't ready for her. It is about a system that saw the danger coming for more than a decade and still could not stop it in time. And it is about the 2 small boys who got out of that car and into a world that will never fully explain to them what happened to people who were supposed to be there. Rest in power, Jennifer. Rest in power, Anastasia. Facts verified. Case concluded. Justice is determined by what can be proven. Subscribe for more documented cases and real criminal investigations.